David Miller never expected this day to change his life forever. A small-town mechanic with grease-stained hands. He was the type of person who gave selflessly, even when there was little left to give. One stormy afternoon, he spotted a sleek, broken-down Mercedes on the side of a lonely highway. Inside her was a woman he didn't know, but sensed she was in urgent need. With a single push and a heart full of compassion, David set events in motion that would shatter the boundaries of fate. Little did he realize that this act of kindness would reveal secrets and fortunes beyond imagination. David Miller grew up in a modest two-bedroom house on the outskirts of Philadelphia. The quiet hum of Route 1 traffic lulled him to sleep at night, and each morning the rising sun revealed the battered family sedan waiting in the driveway, a testament to the Millers' perpetual financial tightrope walk. His parents did their best, but bills outweighed earnings. By the time David was 11, he had learned to fix leaky faucets, mend loose floorboards, and tinker with the family car to keep it running just one more month. That natural inclination toward problem-solving propelled him into the world of mechanics. After high school, a small scholarship to a local technical college gave him the foundational knowledge needed to work with engines. But life had its own way of complicating things. His mother fell ill, and David dropped out of college in his second year to care for her. The scholarship lapsed, and so did his official certification. By the time she recovered, his family had depleted almost every resource they had. Yet David's optimism was a hardy vine refusing to be uprooted. From odd jobs in auto repair shops around Philadelphia to restless nights, sleeping on a friend's couch, David wore the same unwavering grin. He believed that if he kept at it, something good would break his way. He was 28 now, living paycheck to paycheck, renting a cramped studio apartment in a rundown part of town where chain-link fences lined every yard. The paint was peeling on his front door, and his neighbors were as exhausted as he was. Most of them worked 2 jobs, grateful for any hope of upward mobility. When the phone rang, it was usually a customer with a clanging transmission or a squealing belt problem. The calls came in from friends of friends or referrals from some satisfied soul who admired David's thoroughness and honest pricing. He wasn't licensed, he wasn't official, but the word around the neighborhood was that David Miller's the man to call when your car's about to give up the ghost. Despite these marginal successes, David's finances were precarious. On the morning our story truly begins, an overdue electricity bill reminded him that the water heater was on its last legs. He let out a weary sigh. Another day, another impossible challenge. He decided to set out to a local diner for a cup of coffee he couldn't truly afford, steeling himself for another day of hunting for small repair gigs. A thunderstorm brewed overhead, casting ominous clouds across the sky. It was mid-afternoon, the time of day when the city's rush hours hadn't yet begun, but traffic was still heavy with delivery trucks and midday commuters. David had just finished a quick job replacing a brake pad for a friend's cousin when he began the drive home, hoping to beat the storm. He took a detour along a quiet stretch of road near the Delaware River, where skeletal trees loomed like guards on either side. The wind whipped around his rusted old pickup. Rain began to fall light at first, but swiftly intensifying. Streetlights flickered on, illuminating the sheets of water that turned the pavement into a treacherous, glistening path. Up ahead, the brake lights of a luxury sedan shone red through the downpour. The car wasn't moving. Hazard lights flashed. David slowed down and pulled up behind the sleek black Mercedes, noticing its vanity plate, AM 195. A swirl of worry pinched his brow. A Mercedes this expensive seldom ended up in such an out-of-the-way place. Was there an accident? A blowout? He parked on the shoulder, tugged on his hooded jacket, and hopped out into the storm. Wind whipped rain into his face as he walked around to the driver's side window. Within the car, he saw a woman in her mid-30s, drenched in perspiration and anxiety. She cracked the window, her voice shaky. "I can't get the engine to start. It just died on me." David tried a reassuring smile. "Pop the hood. I can take a look." She was reluctant at first. Perhaps she feared a stranger in a deserted place. But in the end, her desperation outweighed her caution. She pulled the hood release. David moved to the front of the Mercedes, wincing as the rain battered him. For 5 minutes, he jiggled wires, checked belts, tested the battery. Water splashed onto his face, the sharp tang of ozone from the lightning overhead, making the air feel electric. Despite his best efforts, the engine wouldn't turn over. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a thunderclap. David slammed the hood shut, noticing the woman's expression behind the windshield, caught between fear and helpless frustration. He approached her window again. "We need to get the car off the road. Could be dangerous here. Let me try to push it to that turnout." She bit her lip nervously. All right. My name is Adriana, by the way." "Adriana Mansfield." "David Miller," he replied. "Let's get you to safety." As she steered, David braced his shoulder against the trunk and pushed with all his might. The slick road made the task brutal, and within moments his clothes were soaked through. Rain hammered them both as the Mercedes rolled slowly forward. Inch by inch, David guided the vehicle to the side of the road, away from the driving lane. Finally, they both collapsed in relief under the meager shelter of a nearby overhang. The Mercedes perched at a safer angle. Panting, David took in the details of Adriana's face, pale and sharp-cheeked, with eyes that carried both sorrow and intelligence. She thanked him through chattering teeth, her body trembling from cold. "We'll need a tow truck," David said. "But in this weather, not sure how soon one will come." Adriana raked her fingers through wet hair, attempting to gather her composure. "I really appreciate your help. I was on my way to an important meeting. My phone is dead too, if you can believe it." The corners of David's mouth turned up ever so slightly. "I can drive you somewhere safe if you like, or to a motel, or if you need to call someone, you can borrow my phone." She looked at him with a blend of humility and gratitude. "Thank you. Let me see if I can just wait a bit longer for a tow. I have a friend, Robert Thompson, who might be able to help." She paused. "But I wouldn't mind that ride to a motel if it's not out of your way." David shrugged. "I don't mind at all. Let's lock your car, and I'll take you. We'll leave a note for the tow guys to pick it up." Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the swirling rain like a strobe light. Adriana nodded, collecting a small clutch from the passenger seat. She made sure to grab an envelope stuffed with documents. Then she followed David toward his ancient Ford pickup. Neither of them knew that this fleeting intersection of two souls would change each life and possibly the world around them in unimaginable ways. Torrential downpour accompanied them all the way to the Flamingo Budget Motel, a no-frills establishment with flickering neon signs and a leaky awning. David pulled up to the entrance. A single overhead bulb cast a weak glow across puddles in the parking lot. Adriana was hesitant. This place might not be the safest." David nodded, understanding. "I can stay until you get a room. Then, if you like, I can come back in the morning to see how your car's doing. Or maybe I can just wait until your friend shows up. I don't mind. He would be sacrificing an entire evening's rest, a precious resource he seldom had the luxury to spare. But something about Adriana's predicament stirred his protective instincts. He saw in her face a vulnerability that reminded him of times he had felt utterly alone. Perhaps that was enough reason. Her shoulders sagged in relief. Thank you. You must be exhausted yourself. David shrugged. I'm all right. Let me see if the manager has a vacant room. Once inside, the manager, a lanky man named Jim Tuttle, with thick glasses, handed Adriana a key in exchange for David's few crumpled bills. She quietly protested wanting to pay for herself, but David waved her off. You can pay me back tomorrow, he insisted. She gave him a long, searching look before finally nodding, turning the key in the grimy lock of room 12. David stepped back, not wanting to crowd her. Get some rest, he said gently. I'll be in my truck outside. Holler if you need anything. Lightning illuminated the sky. Thunder rumbled like a distant train. With a half smile, Adriana slipped into the dingy motel room. David headed back to the truck, intending to wait out the storm. Could he even afford this generosity, or had he just thrown away the last bit of cash that was supposed to cover groceries? He didn't have the heart to calculate. He just did what felt right. He reclined the driver's seat, letting the patter of rain lull him. Within minutes, exhaustion dragged him into a fitful sleep. Sunlight glimmered through parted clouds. Birds chirped a hallelujah of relief for the end of the storm. David awoke with a crick in his neck and numbness in his right arm. Sitting up, he squinted blearily. A new day. A new problem. He rummaged through his mental checklist. Still had an unpaid electricity bill. Still needed groceries. Still had no idea whether Adriana would be okay. He hopped out of the truck, noticing how muddy his boots had become. Shaking off some of the grime, he trudged to room 12 and knocked gently. No answer. After a second knock, he heard muffled footsteps. The door cracked open. Adriana, hair disheveled but face composed, opened the door. Her eyes softened when she saw David. You stayed, she said. I can't believe you actually stayed. He managed a weary grin. I said I would. She invited him in. The room was small and smelled faintly of mildew, but Adriana had tried to organize her things, a neat stack of papers on the bedside table, her damp jacket hanging over the back of a chair. There was a battered coffee maker on the dresser. She had apparently brewed some weak coffee. They each poured a cup, sipping the bitter liquid. Adriana gazed toward the curtained window. I called my friend Robert early this morning from the front desk. He's tied up for now, but he'll come get me tonight. David gave a small nod, doing mental math about his own schedule. Want me to check on your car? I can probably see what's wrong. Worst case, I know a buddy named Chris Foster who can tow it to his garage if you don't trust my driveway repairs. She gave him an uncertain smile. I do trust you, David. You've done more for me than some of my so-called friends would. Her voice trembled slightly, as if she was unused to needing help. But yes, if you can check the car, that would be great. They finished their coffee in a companionable silence, then headed back to the road where the Mercedes sat lifeless under the newly bright sky. The towing note was gone. A local tow truck had evidently not come by. David popped the hood again. This time, with sunlight and a calm environment, he methodically tested every relevant component. It took 2 hours and a trip to a local supply store for a new ignition coil. By noon, he had the engine purring like a contented cat. Adriana was amazed. That's How did you do that so fast? David chuckled. I've seen my share of busted coils. Listen, you should probably let it run for a while to charge the battery. You might have some underlying electrical issues, but I think you're good for now. He wiped the sweat from his brow. Having worked steadily under the sun, his t-shirt was stained with grease and grime. Adriana looked at him, a mix of relief and curiosity in her eyes. Let me pay you, she said. For all the trouble. The motel, the part everything. David put his hands up defensively. I don't have a formal business, so I don't really have a rate sheet. Besides, you're fine. We'll settle up the cost of the coil and maybe a bit for labor if it doesn't break your budget. I know you said you have a friend coming with money, so whenever's convenient. To his astonishment, Adriana rummaged through her purse and pulled out an envelope thick with bills. She tried handing it to David. He balked, stepping back. That's way too much for what I did. Her face was serious. I need to repay your kindness, David. You don't know how much this means to me. David wouldn't accept. He insisted on a far smaller sum, exactly the cost of the coil, plus a modest charge. When he finally took the money, she still looked unsatisfied, as if she needed to do more. Eventually she sighed and placed the envelope back in her purse. You're an odd one, she said quietly. In the best way possible. A slow grin tugged at the corners of David's mouth. I get that a lot. Robert Thompson finally arrived in a shiny BMW that same evening. A middle-aged man with an impeccably tailored suit, he exuded a vibe of quiet authority. Adriana introduced David somewhat awkwardly at first, but with warmth in her voice. Robert eyed David from head to toe, grease-stained clothes, worn-out boots, then gave a polite nod. I appreciate you helping my friend. Robert said, shaking David's hand firmly. There was an intensity in Robert's eyes that David couldn't quite read. Adriana insisted that David allow Robert to buy him dinner. Feeling uncomfortable, but not wanting to offend David, acquiesced. The three ended up at a modest diner just outside of town, over plates of simple comfort food, mashed potatoes, roast beef, and coleslaw. Robert tried to pry into David's life. Ever thought of opening your own shop? Robert asked. With your skill, you could go legit, do more business. David answered truthfully. That would be a dream. But the overhead costs, licensing, insurance, I can't even handle my rent sometimes. Robert nodded, as if assessing the situation. Adriana observed silently. Every now and then David caught her gaze, a soft wave of empathy passing between them. Something about Adriana's quiet manner suggested she was more than she appeared, but he couldn't place it. After dinner, Robert settled the bill and handed David a business card. It bore his name, Robert Thompson, with a contact number and an email domain that was unfamiliar, something with arty equities in it. If you ever need anything, Robert said, give me a call. David slipped the card into his pocket. Sure thing. Then came the moment of goodbye. Adriana stood under the glow of the diner's red neon sign, the black Mercedes purring beside her. She gently took David's hand. You saved me from a worse fate. I'm sure, she said softly. Take care of yourself. David offered a sincere smile. You too. He watched her slide into the driver's seat. For a moment, their eyes met through the window. Then she and Robert were gone, the car's headlights disappearing into the distance. David was left standing in the diner's parking lot, the night air cool against his skin. He felt a fleeting sense of loss, which he quickly brushed aside. Life had taught him to never expect too much. Still, something told him that his path had just intersected with a story far larger than his own. Over the next few weeks, David settled back into his routine of small repair jobs and constant worry about bills. The memory of Adriana Mansfield lingered at the edge of his thoughts, but as the days passed with no word from her, he assumed she had moved on. He did try to Google her, once punching Adriana Mansfield into the search bar. Multiple entries popped up, but none with a face that matched. There were some news articles about philanthropic ventures from a Mansfield Foundation, references to a business empire led by a Mansfield family, but no immediate sign of Adriana herself. The curiosity lingered, but he chalked it up to coincidence. The Mansfield name was hardly rare. Then the unexpected blow struck. David's father called to say his mother's medical bills had skyrocketed again. Insurance coverage was complicated, and she needed a new procedure. David's meager savings evaporated in a matter of days. He found himself behind on rent, facing eviction, if he couldn't produce a lump sum. Desperate, he reached out to every connection he had, looking for side jobs. One day, while rummaging through his old beaten-up wallet, he came across Robert Thompson's business card. He hesitated, thinking of Robert's well-groomed appearance and sophisticated manner. The card had a whiff of importance about it, but David doubted the man wanted to be pestered. Still faced with looming eviction, David dialed the number. To his surprise, Robert answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, collected, but not unfriendly. "David, good to hear from you. Been a while?" David cleared his throat. "Yeah, hi. I was just wondering if I could talk to you about some work. I'm in a bind, financially." Robert didn't hesitate. "Of course, I'll text you an address. Meet me there tomorrow morning." David's heart pounded. Was this a lifeline or a wild goose chase? He had no choice but to find out. The next day, David arrived at a sleek, modern office building in downtown Philadelphia. Polished glass windows reflected a blue autumn sky. A small sign near the door read RT Equities. The lobby was opulent marble floors, an ornate chandelier. David felt like a fish out of water in his scuffed boots and threadbare flannel shirt. A receptionist led him to the top-floor suite, where Robert Thompson awaited, seated behind a mahogany desk. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Robert smiled, gesturing for David to take a seat. "How can I help?" Robert asked, leaning forward slightly. David tried to appear composed. "I'm behind on bills. My mum's medical costs are crushing me. I don't expect handouts, but if you have any mechanical work, or if you know anyone who needs a reliable mechanic, I'm ready to hustle." Robert folded his hands. "I might have something better for you." He pressed a button on the desk phone. "Send Ms. Mansfield in." Within seconds, the door swung open. Adriana Mansfield stepped in, wearing a fitted navy blazer and pencil skirt, her hair pinned back. David's heart jolted in surprise. She nodded politely, glancing at Robert. "You called." Robert stood, smiling like a cat that had caught a canary. "We have an opportunity for Mr. Miller. I'll let you explain." Adriana stepped closer, meeting David's eyes. Gone was the uncertain traveler. In her place stood a confident, poised woman. She extended a hand for a firm shake. "David, it's nice to see you again." David's voice came out softer than he intended. "Same here." Adriana turned to Robert. "We had a conversation about how we might help you, David, after everything you did. Robert here manages many of my family's investments." She cleared her throat. "But we want to keep certain things discreet." She paused, weighing her words. Let's be honest, I'm not just Adriana Mansfield, a random driver you helped. I'm from the Mansfield family, the owners of the Mansfield Foundation, Mansfield Industries, and several other ventures. The car breakdown was an unplanned moment. I was traveling incognito, checking up on one of our real estate properties, and I wanted no entourage, no security detail. Robert is both a family friend and an investment advisor. David felt his heart thud in his chest. The name Mansfield. The Mansfield Foundation was rumored to be worth billions. Could it be that Adriana was one of the heirs? He swallowed hard, struggling to keep composure. Adriana took a breath, continuing. I had my reasons for traveling alone. You selflessly helped me, without knowing anything about who I was. That meant more to me than you can imagine. I'd like to return the favor in some way. We have a project that might interest you, a chain of auto repair shops that Mansfield Industries is investing in. We plan to open them in underprivileged areas, offering discounted services to lower-income communities. We need people who are passionate, skilled, and empathic. People like you. David's mind raced. This was too surreal. Are you offering me a job? Robert chimed in. Not just a job, a managerial position with training and official certification process and a stable salary. Full benefits. The goal is to place you in charge of one of our pilot shops. David gripped the armrests. An official job in a well-funded enterprise, this could solve everything. But it felt like stepping into someone else's life. Why? Me? He asked hoarsely. Adriana's voice softened. Because you have the heart for it, and the skill. This is exactly the kind of person we want heading these community shops. We want someone who won't turn folks away because they can't afford top-dollar rates. We want fairness and kindness. For a moment, David let the possibility sink in. He thought of his mother, the overdue bills, the dire straits he'd been facing. This opportunity could rescue him from a spiral of debt. But was it real? Robert handed him a folder. Review the terms. If you agree, sign the preliminary contract, and we'll start the ball rolling. You'll go through a short training period to learn about our systems. Then we'll help you set up the first location. David flipped through the pages, a wave of astonishment gripping him at the salary figures, the health insurance details, and the expansion plans. This is more than generous. Adriana folded her arms, leaning back slightly. You deserve it. But David, there's a catch. We're not just giving handouts. This is business, and there's risk. If you mismanage the shop, if you choose not to show up, you could lose the position. We need a full commitment. David looked up, eyes blazing with gratitude. I'm all in. The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind. David found himself in training sessions with accountants, lawyers, and facility planners. He had never worn a suit or a tie so often in his life. Initially, the corporate environment overwhelmed him. Boardroom talk of profit margins and community outreach synergy made him dizzy. Yet he persevered, determined not to squander this chance. Adriana was often present, quietly observing. Every so often she'd pull him aside, offering gentle words of encouragement. Just be yourself, David. They can teach you the numbers, but they can't teach empathy. That's what you bring. They began to share small, personal moments, late-night coffee runs after marathon training sessions, or quiet lunches in the courtyard, discussing their childhood dreams. David realized Adriana carried her own burdens, the weight of a billionaire family legacy, complicated relationships with corporate board members, and a desire to do genuine good in the world. She listened intently to David's stories of scraping by, of times he had to refuse medical treatments for himself so his mother could have hers. Their bond grew in these fleeting pockets of companionship. Rumors swirled among the staff, curious glances and whispered speculation about the closeness between the heir to Mansfield and the new hire. But Adriana and David kept things strictly professional in public. At least they tried to. One day, while reviewing building layouts for the pilot auto shop, Adriana led David through a newly renovated facility. The floors were polished concrete, the walls freshly painted in the Mansfield Foundation's logo colors. Lift equipment gleamed in the overhead fluorescent lights. David ran a hand along the shiny metal beams of the brand-new car lift. A sense of awe washed over him. It was a far cry from his usual makeshift tool sets and second-hand lifts. Adriana smiled at his wonder. "This is the future, David. Ready for it?" He turned to her sincerity in his gaze. "As ready as I'll ever be. Thank you, Adriana. For everything." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "You're welcome. But this is just the beginning." Even as hope blossomed, tension lurked in the corners of this new reality. Some board members questioned Adriana's involvement with David. They saw him as an unrefined mechanic, unworthy of the Mansfield brand. Rumblings of disapproval surfaced. At board meetings, older executives with names like Harrington and Winthrop expressed concerns. "You're giving the pilot shop to a man with no formal certification." One silver-haired board member scoffed, reading from a dossier. "His credit score is abysmal. He has no proven track record in management." Adriana stood firm, though her jaw tightened. "That's precisely why we're doing this. We're giving talented individuals the chance they wouldn't otherwise have." Some of her relatives, including a distant cousin, Sarah Nicholson, who managed philanthropic audits, questioned the scale of her personal involvement. "It seems like you're crossing professional lines, Adriana. Are you sure this is wise?" Adriana refused to bend. She knew the difference between charity for PR's sake and genuine empowerment. David was the real deal, and she intended to prove it to the rest of the board. As for Robert Thompson, though he had been the initial bridge, David noticed him becoming more guarded. Perhaps Robert had concerns about how close Adriana and David were growing. David often felt Robert studying him, as if measuring David's loyalty or potential for trouble. Still, David pressed on, determined to justify the faith Adriana had placed in him. Over a candlelit dinner one evening, an accidental spur-of-the-moment outing after a late training session, David and Adriana found themselves sharing more than just aspirations. They revealed vulnerabilities. David confessed feeling unworthy, overshadowed by the grandeur of her name and the opportunity she had granted him. Adriana spoke of the suffocating expectations placed on her since childhood. Wine loosened their tongues, and soon they were laughing like old friends. Adriana recounted tales of her rebellious teenage years, how she'd slip out of her parents' estate to ride public transit incognito, finding solace among real people. David shared memories of fixing his father's battered pickup in the middle of the night, learning by trial and error. A comfortable lull settled. Adriana's eyes gleamed in the soft light. She reached across the table, resting her hand atop David's calloused knuckles. The moment felt electric. He locked eyes with her, swallowing hard. Fear, desire, gratitude, emotions merged into one swirling tide. "David," she began softly, "I never expected to meet someone who'd make me see my world in a different light." "But you do." His heart pounded. "Same here," he breathed, voice unsteady. Neither voiced the word love, but it echoed unspoken in the hush around them. They left the restaurant, hand in hand, stepping into a swirl of city lights. The tension of an impossible romance mechanic and billionaire hung in the air. Unbeknownst to them, trouble brewed in the Mansfield family board, a faction led by an uncle named James Reed, who had married into the family, considered David a threat both to Adriana's professional judgment and to their own aspirations. They believed the pilot auto shop was a wasteful venture, better replaced by a more profitable real estate flip. James reached out to Robert Thompson, pressing him to sabotage the project. Surely there's a way to prove that David Miller isn't capable. All it takes is one slip-up, and the board will pivot. Robert resisted at first, but felt the mounting pressure. He made subtle moves to hamper David's progress delays in the shipping of equipment, confusion about permits and so forth. David, drowning in new paperwork, chalked these delays up to normal bureaucratic red tape. Adriana, however, grew suspicious. She knew Robert well enough to sense that he was stalling. Confronting him in a private meeting, she demanded an explanation. He evaded direct answers, giving empty assurances that everything was proceeding on schedule. She left the meeting unsettled, determined to keep a closer eye on the operations. At last, opening day for the pilot shop arrived. The building was modest, but fully equipped: a spacious garage, a comfortable waiting area, and an attached classroom for free auto maintenance workshops. Adriana arranged a soft opening, inviting community members to drop by. Various local news outlets showed mild interest, curious about Mansfield Foundation's new philanthropic angle. David donned a crisp new uniform with the Mansfield Foundation logo, a far cry from his usual grease-spattered t-shirts. His staff included a few local mechanics he'd personally recruited. Maria Jenkins, an ex-military mechanic with a knack for diesel engines, and Elton Brown, a friend from David's old neighborhood who was itching for a stable job. Together, they welcomed the first wave of customers, mostly neighbors intrigued by discounted services. Adriana watched from the sidelines, pride shining in her eyes, as David confidently ran diagnostics, explained pricing structures, and offered honest recommendations for repairs. The vibe was friendly, personal, nothing like the cold corporate chain shops that had given the industry a bad name. But amid the success, David spotted Robert near the exit, speaking quietly with James Reed. Their body language was tense. James glared at David through the crowd, turning away abruptly. David's stomach tightened. Something was amiss. 2 weeks later, tragedy struck. A catastrophic brake failure in a car, recently serviced at David's shop, resulted in a serious accident. The driver was hospitalized with severe injuries. Local media exploded with headlines: Mansfield Foundation's new auto shop under fire, after dangerous repair error. David was mortified. He reviewed the shop's logs. Maria Jenkins had worked on the brake system. She insisted she had done everything by the book. Yet the news outlets cited an anonymous source stating the shop had used counterfeit brake pads to cut costs. An official inquiry began. James Reed, seizing the opportunity, called for an emergency board meeting to suspend operations pending investigation. This fiasco is tarnishing the Mansfield brand, he declared. Some board members demanded David's immediate dismissal. Adriana was livid. We don't have all the facts yet. This has never been about profits. It's about community care. David and his team wouldn't risk customer safety to save a few pennies. She urged the board to wait for a formal audit. Privately, David battled guilt and self-doubt. Could something have slipped through had he overlooked a faulty shipment of brake pads? Or was this sabotage desperate to clear the shop's name David and Adriana launched their own investigation. They contacted the brake pad supplier, Maxwell Motors, requesting batch numbers and safety certificates. The supplier's records indicated no anomalies. Digging deeper, they discovered a suspicious paper trail. The original crate of brake pads had been replaced by a last-minute urgent delivery, allegedly authorized by a corporate officer. The digital signature on the authorization looked like Robert Thompson's. Confronting Robert in his posh office, they presented the evidence. Robert's face turned ashen, and he stammered, I had no idea. I was told the original shipment had a defect, so I authorized a replacement. James assured me it was the right move. Adriana's voice trembled with anger. You realize the replacement pads were counterfeit, right? Robert hung his head, corners of his eyes moist. I swear I didn't know. James was pushing. I was manipulated. Rage flared in David's chest. Somebody's in the hospital because of this. Our shop is on the brink of closure. All for what? So you could sabotage us. Robert shook his head frantically. I never intended for this. James said he just wanted to slow things down, not harm anyone. I didn't realize the brake pads were unsafe. Adriana took a steadying breath. We'll handle James, she said coldly. Armed with the evidence, Adriana and David marched into the next board meeting, tension thick as wire. James Reed sat smugly anticipating David's condemnation. One by one, the board members glared disapprovingly at David, but Adriana stood commanding attention. We've discovered that the brake pads causing the tragic accident were counterfeit, introduced via a last-minute shipment authorized by Mr. Thompson under instructions from James Reed, she said. Here's the paper trail. She distributed copies of the emails and shipping records. A murmur of shock rippled around the table. James's face drained of color, and he tried to deny involvement, but the evidence was too damning. David's voice cut through the heavy silence. We're not just dealing with sabotage of a pilot project. Someone's life is at stake. We have a driver in the hospital because of these black market parts. I won't stand by while you ruin everything this foundation is supposed to stand for. Several board members whispered among themselves. James attempted a feeble defense. Adriana, you can't believe I intended to harm anyone. I was only trying to show that David's shop was incompetent. The room erupted in outrage. Adriana clenched her fists. Congratulations, James. You've proven your own incompetence and cruelty. With unanimous agreement from the stunned board, James Reed was stripped of all decision-making authority, pending a full legal investigation. As for the pilot shop, operations were paused, but only until an internal audit confirmed the sabotage. The board members apologized to David some more sincerely than others. The hospital crash victim survived, though, with injuries requiring therapy. Mansfield's legal team offered a settlement and covered all medical costs. Upon learning the sabotage story, the driver's family expressed relief that it hadn't been an intentional act by David's team. Following a thorough audit, the pilot shop was cleared of wrongdoing. Customer goodwill soared when local media outlets ran follow-up pieces exposing James Reed's duplicity. Donations poured in to support the philanthropic model. Even the board recognized the shop's potential to restore the Mansfield Foundation's public image. Adriana reinstated David as the pilot shop's manager, praising him for his integrity under pressure. To celebrate, they held a community event with free car inspections and a barbecue in the shop's parking lot. Everyone turned out: local families, neighborhood associations, curious onlookers, even some local celebrities. The mood was jubilant. In the midst of the festivities, David found Adriana by the refreshments table, smiling at the line of folks waiting for free checkups. He touched her shoulder gently. "This is what it's all about," he said. "Thank you for believing in me even when everyone else didn't." She turned, eyes shimmering. "We believed in each other." Before they could say another word, Maria Jenkins called David over to handle a tricky engine knock. He gave Adriana a parting smile, rushing to do what he did best: help people. With the scandal behind them and the pilot shop officially cleared of wrongdoing, David Miller finally felt a sense of balance return to his life. It wasn't just the kind of balance that came from paid bills or steady work. It was the deeper, quieter peace that came from knowing you were finally on the right path. The auto shop now buzzed with purpose. Each morning, David arrived early, coffee in hand, to prep the garage. The team, Maria Elton and 2 new hires, worked with energy and pride. Word had spread fast in the neighborhood. Mansfield Auto Care wasn't just another business, it was a place that cared. A place you could trust, and David, he no longer had to choose between fixing a car and fixing his life. He caught up on his mother's medical bills, moved her into a better facility with specialized care, and helped Elton pay off a lingering debt. He even surprised himself by signing the lease for a modest new home, one with a real backyard and space for a workshop. For the first time in years, he had a savings account and dreams that didn't feel far-fetched. His relationship with Adriana had blossomed in the background, slow and steady. They didn't flaunt it, but anyone who saw them together could feel the connection. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was in the way she'd stop by with lunch on a busy day, or the way he'd instinctively reach for her hand when they walked side by side. Robert Thompson, now carefully rebuilding his reputation, worked tirelessly to expand the community garage model. His efforts under Adriana's close watch showed real promise. He'd earned back some of the trust he lost, especially from David. One evening, over a plate of pasta and the soft glow of a porch light, David turned to Adriana and said, "We should create a program for teens. Kids like I was hands-on learners who need someone to believe in them." Adriana's eyes lit up. "A mentorship and scholarship program." She nodded. "Let's build it. Together." David smiled, feeling the weight of that word together and all that it promised. A new chapter had begun, and this time it was one they would write side by side. The night air was crisp as David and Adriana walked hand in hand beneath a canopy of golden lamplight. They had just finished dinner at a small Italian bistro, one of Adriana's favorites, tucked away on a quiet street in downtown Philadelphia. Neither of them said much on the walk back to David's truck. Their silence wasn't awkward. It was thick with meaning, a shared awareness that something important hovered just beneath the surface. When they reached the truck, they paused near the curb, reluctant to end the evening. Adriana turned to face him fully, her fingers tightening gently around his. "David," she began, her voice quiet but unwavering. "I feel like we've been dancing around something for a while now." He nodded slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. "Yeah, we have." Her eyes searched his. "You've changed my life, you know. Not just because you helped me on the side of that road, but because of everything since. You've reminded me what it means to trust, what it means to feel real again." David swallowed the lump in his throat. "You've changed mine too, Adriana. You gave me a future when I thought I didn't have one left." There was a beat of silence, a quiet inhale between 2 heartbeats. "I love you," she said, the words trembling but sincere. "I've never said that to someone, and meant it the way I do now." "You?" You see me. Not the name. Not the money. Just me. David's breath caught, but his eyes didn't waver. I love you too, he said, his voice thick. I think I've known it for a while. But tonight, I had to hear it, to believe it. Adriana's lips curled into a smile, just as she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his waist. David pulled her close, their foreheads touching, and then, under the lamplight, they kissed a slow, certain kiss that spoke of everything they'd endured and everything they hoped to build. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't flashy. It was perfect. When they finally pulled apart, Adriana whispered, "Whatever comes next, we face it together." David nodded, still holding her close. Together. A full year had passed since the rainy afternoon when David Miller had stopped to help a stranger on the side of the road. That stranger, Adriana Mansfield, was no longer just a name etched into memory. She had become his partner in every sense, in work, in love, and in purpose. The pilot shop David had helped launch had blossomed into a bustling hub of honest work and community empowerment. Mansfield Auto Care, as it was now known, had expanded into a full-fledged initiative. 7 new shops across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New Jersey had been established, each replicating the original model: affordable repairs, transparent pricing, and vocational mentorship for youth from underprivileged communities. Each shop employed hand-picked, skilled mechanics, many of whom had once been overlooked or written off by traditional systems. And each location offered more than just service. It offered opportunity. Daniel, a 19-year-old, who'd once dropped out of high school, now led the electrical diagnostics department at the Allentown branch. In Pittsburgh, Maria Jenkins had risen to manage her own team, mentoring young women who had previously been told mechanics was men's work. The Mansfield Foundation's board, once skeptical, now lauded the program as one of their most impactful ventures. Philanthropic awards began pouring in, and media outlets from Forbes to NPR covered the story of the mechanic who helped a billionaire, and how that moment sparked a revolution in how community repair shops could operate. Adriana had grown too. Gone was the tight-lipped, guarded heiress, burdened by boardroom politics and generational expectations. In her place stood a woman both commanding and compassionate. She had embraced her role as a change-maker, focusing more of her energy on projects that aligned with her values rather than the cold calculations of profit margins. Her bond with David deepened daily. Their love was not flashy or dramatic. It was quietly powerful. Built on respect, on shared meals, after long work days, on laughter over coffee at sunrise, and mutual support through every success and challenge. Robert Thompson, once embroiled in scandal, had rebuilt his reputation. He remained under the board's watchful eye, but worked diligently to prevent another sabotage incident. With David's support and forgiveness, he spearheaded new transparency protocols for all Mansfield vendors and suppliers. Over time, his sincerity convinced even the toughest skeptics. As for David, life was finally something he could breathe into. The pressure of poverty had lifted. His mother's treatments were now comfortably covered by health insurance. He had moved into a humble but spacious home on a quiet street with a small backyard where he kept a grill, a vegetable patch, and a partially restored '68 Camaro, the same model his dad had once driven. It was his weekend project, his way of staying grounded. But the greatest transformation wasn't in assets or achievements. It was internal. David had found a sense of worth he never thought possible. He no longer saw himself as someone who almost made it. He was living proof that resilience paired with kindness could not only change a life, but reshape a legacy. One golden autumn evening, Adriana led David up a gentle hill at the edge of a quiet estate property just outside Philadelphia. Lanterns lined the walkway, casting a soft glow as twilight descended. The breeze rustled the trees, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and anticipation. Beneath the wide canopy of an ancient oak tree, she stopped. David looked around, puzzled. "You're being mysterious again," he teased. Adriana smiled, her eyes shining. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "David," she said, voice trembling slightly, but filled with conviction. "I've seen what hope looks like. I've seen what change feels like. And I want to spend the rest of my life building more of it with you." She opened the box. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, was a simple, elegant band. No diamonds, no grandeur. Just authenticity. "Will you marry me?" she asked softly. David's breath caught. Time seemed to still around them. Then a wide grin stretched across his face, tears already forming at the corners of his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. 1,000 times yes. She laughed through her tears, and they embraced beneath the sprawling oak as its leaves swayed gently in celebration. In the months that followed, their love continued to ripple outward through new shops, new programs, and every life touched by the kindness that had first brought them together. Their wedding, held in a small courtyard beside one of the flagship shops, was filled with community members, mechanics, youth apprentices, and former customers, all dressed in their Sunday best. And in that ceremony, standing in front of the people whose lives they'd impacted, David and Adriana made their vow to build, to serve, to love fully, freely, and forever. Thank you for joining us on this journey of resilience, sacrifice, and genuine human connection. David's story reminds us that a simple act of kindness can unleash extraordinary possibilities and spark life-changing alliances. And Adriana's choice shows that beyond wealth lies the greatest treasure of all, empathy and love. If this true-to-life drama captivated your heart, please share this video so others can be inspired by David's selfless generosity. Like this video to support the channel and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss our upcoming stories of real-life courage, romance, and transformation. Your engagement helps us bring more tales of hope and humanity to light. Together, let's champion kindness, celebrate perseverance, and remember that in every challenge lies a hidden seed of opportunity, just waiting for someone with a caring heart to nurture it into something extraordinary. Remember, your kindness can change a life too. Share, subscribe, and stay inspired.